Hello everyone. Summer is coming again. Well, summer is pretty much here actually, and I'm feeling like I want to ride some thermals, and I used to do that with my ASW28, but unfortunately I sold that a few years ago and I'm kind of regretting it. So here I am making a plane to replace it pretty much, and this is going to be very, as you can see, very similar sort of layout and everything, although it will be about half the weight of the ASW28, hopefully. So I made this by looking around for pictures of gliders on the internet. So I found this sexy looking thing here, and they have very kindly given me a 3-view like this, which I used in OpenVSP to base the dimensions and everything off. I didn't really change a whole lot on this. So what usually happens is I start off with a 3-view like this to base something on, and then I change a whole bunch of things so that it no longer really represents the thing that I started with very much. But this time it's relatively true to the original. The only thing I've changed is that this droop downwards here in the front of the fuselage. I presume this is something to do with you need to put a human in there, and there's pesky humans, they want to look out the window and they want to put their butt somewhere, things like that. But for a model it doesn't really need to do that, I don't think. So the fuselage at the front more or less just goes straight forward in my one. The other main thing I changed is that this ridiculously thin, long wing, I just felt that was a bit too risky to try and make. And also at model scale, I felt like the surfaces needed to be larger, so I've made the chord about probably at least 20% bigger for the wings. The horizontal stabilizer is larger and the rudder is also larger, so all the surfaces all around are larger. Oh, and I don't have these fancy little winglets on there either. But everything else is pretty much true to that, and so I brought that into Onshape. As you can see, I've been twiddling around a lot with getting parts to cut out on my laser cutter. So this is the first time I've had a laser cutter when I'm making a plane, so I kind of went all out using the laser cutter just about anywhere I could to make things easy for me, and made some little jigs, as we'll see, for gluing things up. And it's all been very convenient. So I didn't use my CNC router as a router at all for this build, so that's kind of interesting. First time, I think. But yeah, I just really love the way laser cutting is so easy to set up, and it's so quick and less risky, and it's just so easy. But anyway, let's see a little bit of this plane being built. Okay, I think I have most of the laser cut parts done now. The design of this plane was partially driven by the fact that the only XPS foam I have available these days is this 75mm stuff, which is quite thick, and it's not really as convenient as the 5 and the 3cm ones that I've used in the past. It's also a little bit softer, it seems, but anyway, the spacing of these plates here is 75mm, or 70, it's going to be 76 actually, so something like that anyway. And the idea is that little bits of it will be stuck in between these formers like that. Obviously the triangle bits at the bottom will be broken off later on. That's just so that everything can sit flat on the bench and be in the same alignment with this 8mm tube in it. That 8mm tube actually only goes up to there. You can see there's a split there, so there's a 6mm tube inside it just to keep them straight. And when it's all done, this canopy or fuselage, what do you call it, where the pilot would sit, that's all going to be hollowed out, and then this bit will have to slide out and come out afterwards. The reason it's on there for now is, again, just to align everything in the right place. For the wings, I'm quite happy with the way the laser does these. I've able to work in the twist as well, so the bits at the bottom are a jig, so to speak, so you can line up the front of that and the bottom of it and get it nice and square, and then you'll get the twist in the wing that you want. So that's, you may be able to see that that wing is the root, and it's going up slightly, and at the tip it's going down slightly, and you can see it's spaced way back here as well. So anyway, I've got a lot of preparation to do with these, because to do hot wire cutting of something this thin, it's very inconvenient to do it if the piece you're cutting from is so thick like that. So what I'm first going to have to do is try and slice these down the middle like that, and hopefully they don't bend, because I did that once with a thinner slice, like a 10mm slice, and it went all bendy. But hopefully if I get it right in the middle and these sides are thick enough, then they're not going to bend. And for most of the first part of this construction, I'm going to have to use Yoo-Hoo Paul, which is not really my first choice, but my Gorilla Glue, I just got this out and it is like a block of concrete in there, so unfortunately can't use that. The reason I prefer the Gorilla Glue is because when it's dry it's hard and you can sand it almost like plywood in a way, and it sands down nice and smooth, whereas the Yoo-Hoo Pour is a little bit stretchy and rubbery, and as you try and sand it, it just sort of pulls along with the sandpaper and stretches, and then it breaks off sometimes and it rolls and it makes nasty little like grooves in the foams that you're trying to sand. So it's not ideal, but I'll give it a try this time. To make the spar box, I've cut these little pieces like that with the laser. They have a 5-degree dihedral in them, and they are sized so that when you place a 10mm tube in there, it will sit down in that groove at just the right amount. I think it's like 0.5 millimeter or something, and then you can sand off the edges like that at the inside so that it makes a nice little V. And I'll start off by just tacking those on there with CA, and then I'll tack the other side on so that it'll be, you know, parallel like that. And then I'll put some carbon tow over the top and the bottom of that, and then that's going to fit into this slot here. Okay, I have most of these slices cut out now. They kind of look like rolls of toilet paper, some of them. And the next step is to put this spar box into the actual pieces where it's going to go. These bits on the end were just temporary to hold it in place, or to get it all aligned exactly. So the whole bottom surface of this here, the idea is that that could be pressed against the bench nice and flat, like that, to get it all solid and correct. And I put some carbon tow along the bottom and the top of the carbon fibre tube pieces in there. So now I can just take these out like that. So there's the same slots up in there. And I'm going to use these squares and a slice of the same thickness of foam and press that together and get it all nice and square. Well, I ended up making a special trip into town just to get some Gorilla Glue because I really didn't fancy dealing with the problems that the Yoo-hoo paw would cause while I'm trying to sand it. So I've got some brand new Gorilla Glue, and I think I'll keep this in a Ziploc bag or something to try and keep it from drying out next time. So I'm going to glue all these tail bits together. There's nothing really complicated in there, so I'll just do that all in one go. These other bits though, they require a little bit more finesse and alignment and stuff, particularly this one. I'm going to have to cut a bunch of this. See, this piece goes inside there, but the top of it's all going to have to be cut out so that these bits can slot in, and then I'll probably have to cut some bits of foam and poke them in the top there. Back here we have some very fancy jigs, jigs that I made on the laser cutter. This is probably not something I would have bothered making if I had to CNC machine it, but with a laser cutter it's everything's quite easy. So these are just to get the wing twist correct, and also the plan form as well, because the front of these bits are referenced against the front edge of the bench, so I can get the correct sweep angle of the wing all the way down. So this is probably going to be the best glued wing I've ever made. Okay, I have the rear of the fuselage all assembled there, and I have the front stuck together, most of it anyway, and you can see in here how it's going to look. I took out most of that stuff there just to make it a little bit easier to remove later on, but I needed to keep the bulkheads with those holes in there, so this 10mm tube and the 8mm tube there are going to be used to get everything aligned. And because it's sitting nicely on the desk, everything's lined up with these things here, I can just put it on there quite easily. So next step is to glue that on there and put some foam pieces back into there, and then pull this 10mm tube out and stick that on there, glue that one on. Alright, I used my hot wire cutting thingy to make a channel for the spar, like that. And we're going to glue in an 8mm carbon fibre tube, which has a 6mm tube going into it there. It's probably the thinnest spar I've made, but I think these thin skinny wings are calling for that kind of a thin spar. And I figured while it's being glued in there I might as well put it back in this jig to hold it all nice and straight. And I also figured I'd make a little jig for an extra bit of tube over there, so I can make sure that the spar itself, as it sits in there and the glue dries, it's going to be perfectly straight to like where the other side will be over there. Well, I eventually ended up making 3 versions of this tailplane. The first 2 were with 1/8 inch balsa, which is kind of my first choice. Unfortunately, this carbon toe that I put on here, I got this from AliExpress, and they just wrapped it around a piece of cardboard like that. It's quite wide, which is nice, but because they've wrapped it like that, it's really hard to straighten it out and get it looking nice, so it ended up looking kind of shitty. So I didn't really like that. It's nice and stiff though, but the carbon's a little bit lumpy. And also I forgot to put some peel play on here where I'm going to have to glue the vertical on. And I've sanded it a bit there, so I probably could use this. It's definitely nice and stiff, but I just didn't really like it that much. So my next try was with no carbon and 2 pieces of fiberglass on each side. This only had 1. This is also usable, but it's noticeably more flexy, but looks a bit nicer, and I remembered to put the peel play on. But then I thought, you know what, I got some new carbon toe, so I got this from a place in New Zealand, Carbon Fibre NZ, but it looks like it just came from AliExpress anyway, because somebody's handwritten in Chinese on there 30 meters. So I probably could have just bought that on AliExpress myself and saved a bit of money. But anyway, so I've been using this carbon toe here like that. Because it's on the roll, it's much nicer and straighter and easier to lay down flat like this. So I made a 3rd version of this, and unfortunately I only had 3/32 balsa for this, so even though there is a little bit more carbon on there, it's still fairly flexy, probably about the same as that one, but I think it'll be fine. Like, you don't really need too much strength in this, and if you're only flexing it from here to here, it actually feels pretty good, and that's all that matters. And I put my peel play on there, and I also remembered this time to make sure that there was a lot of glass on the trailing edge overhanging that would stick to the other side, because that's a free way to get more surface area that doesn't weigh much. So it's and you can trim it off if it's too much or whatever. But anyway, so I'm going to go with this one, and it's a lot lighter than those ones as well. Here's the vertical stabilizer. It's all ready to go. Looking quite nice. This is the last of my Red Raven fiberglass, which is noticeably smoother. The weave is tighter packed, and it goes on beautifully, and you don't need to sand at all. Like, as soon as it's dried, it's just smooth and ready to go. It's perfect. But unfortunately I've run out of that. This is feeling a bit heavy because it's got 2 Metal Gear servos in there, so it's kind of good that this horizontal is nice and light. And next thing I have to do is put lots and lots of fiberglass and carbon fiber on this bit here. I've glassed the tail up to here so I can hold it. I'll have something easy to hold it with while I'm doing this bit. And I think I'll put a little bit of this 200 gram glass. It's a little bit thick, but I had this piece sitting here which is about the right size. I'll just put that on the bottom, or the bottom there, and probably a bunch of this carbon toe around the sides, and then a whole bunch of 100 gram fiberglass on there, and see how that goes. For this canopy, I've just been marking out where it's going to be with the help of a piece of paper like that. It has to match up with these little cutouts in the edge here where I've made a weaker piece that goes across the middle. So the plan is to use this coping saw. Well, first I'll cut along the side with the coping saw blade that has the peg removed from it, and then I'll use the actual coping saw to cut through the piece of wood there. And the plan was to fiberglass over it all first and then do that, but what I'm thinking is it might be easier to cut this off now and then glue it back in, and then in the gap I'll just put a little bit of that white putty, and that'll make it a whole lot easier to get off later, because I'll only be cutting through the fiberglass to get it off, instead of having to cut through the fiberglass and the foam and the plywood all in one go and try and keep it straight and look nice. Well, that was rather more work than I thought, but I managed to get that bit off. So you can see I had only a little bit of wood where it was hanging on, so I just had to cut through that with the coping saw. It looks a bit shitty inside, but all of this is going to be removed, so it's just going to be the fiberglass, or probably some carbon fiber as well, skin on the side here. So now I'm just going to glue this back in, but not much, you know, just a little bit of glue on here, probably to hold it in place while it's fiberglassing. Okay, so that's all cured now, and I sanded it just a little bit, and I managed to cut out the canopy in pretty much the way I was hoping for, except that it was much more difficult than when I was doing it with the twin hopper. I think with the twin hopper I might have done this cut before the epoxy was fully cured, plus I was only cutting through 2 layers of 50 gram glass versus about 8 layers of 100 gram glass here, so it was extremely uncooperative, and I'd let it cure fully before I tried to cut it, which was kind of dumb as well. So I started with this just to get the line in the right place carefully, but I ended up having to use a piece of that blade in the vice grip so that I could sort of get a really good grip on it and like what do you call it? Go like that to get it in, move along a little bit, move along a little bit. Took quite a while, but it is off now, and it's actually still sitting in place quite nicely because of these foam bits all mesh into each other. So all that is going to come out, but I think what I'll do first is I'll just gouge out a little bit of it at a few places around here, and I'll build up a little platform on one side or the other to put magnets on, so that when all this foam and plywood is completely taken out, it'll just sit perfectly into where those magnets said it should go, and hopefully it's going to be the same, you know, smooth surface. Over here I managed to pull out the first one of those,
This one's a little bit tougher, but I think if I just pull on with the pliers, I'll pull on this self-tapping screw that I put in there, and that should just pop straight out. It's going to be quite nice and strong here because there's 16 layers of 100-gram glass that all converge in the same place. And I also put quite a lot of extra glass in this bit here. The carbon area should be fine, but I left this with no carbon because I want the radio antenna to be there. And from here we have carbon tube inside again, so it's just this bit here that's probably the concern for strength. Well, that little plug piece came out fairly easily, and we have a lovely foam tube in there where the motor's going to go. That foam's all going to come out, of course, because the motor wires have to go into the back there, and they need some room. But the motor will go in there like that, and then this thing will go sort of on the front of it like that. Should all match up quite nicely. I'm going to use these little magnets again to hold the canopy on. This works quite well. So I've made a hole in each side. It's quite useful that the foam is still there for me to do this. And then you use a bit of this microfiber stuff with the epoxy, put that in each of the holes, and then on one side you put a magnet in, and then a little bit of glass, then some plastic wrap, then another bit of glass, and then the other magnet goes on there, and then you can turn it over and stick it in while both sides are wet. It works quite well that way, and it gets you a perfect alignment. Okay, I'm all ready to glass the wings now. I've got the pieces for that cut out over there, and I got some of these little 4.5 gram servos. This is what I did last time when I made Homeslice, whatever it was, the sailplane one. And I kind of regretted it because the gears stripped out on them, both of them actually, so I had to replace them with the normal 9 gram servos. But these ones are metal gear, so I'm hoping they'll be alright. Not sure, I've never seen that brand before, but yeah, hopefully they'll be okay because I've kind of committed to it now. So there's a servo in there. And the spar goes through here, and I didn't really want to make this servo cable go all the way around the spar and back to here, so I've actually dug it underneath the spar, and you can sort of see it's going, a little bit hard to see there, but it goes under the spar to here and then through there. It's a little bit wacky, but hopefully it'll be alright. So after I cut out all the pieces for the wings for the fiberglass, this is the piece of fiberglass that I'm left with. That's all I have now, 50 gram fiberglass. And I was already thinking I might not be making many more of these planes in this kind of fiberglass over foam style. So maybe this is fate telling me it's a good point to stop. I was actually thinking to hold off glassing these wings until I could find some more of this. This is the really nice glass that I started off with a few years ago. That was what I was using all the time. But then the local place that sold that, they don't sell it anymore. So this stuff I got off AliExpress. But this stuff is much nicer. So if anybody knows where I can get that, I googled around a bit, but I couldn't even figure out like where it's made or anything. But I'd gladly buy some more of that. And 50 gram, of course, not. I think the local shop has 25 grams, which is not very appealing because I'd have to put 2 layers on. Might be right with 1 layer, but it's very difficult to handle because it's so light and wispy. It's just really awkward. Okay, I have the wings all glassed now. I was going to do a time lapse of that, but we've had some really nice weather here lately, and it was quite a warm day, and I wasn't wearing a shirt, so we're not going to. I'm not going to put that on YouTube. This wing here, I put a strip of carbon fiber toe down there just in case it made any difference, but then I forgot to put it on this one. I don't think it really matters. But anyway, the glass turned out quite nice on these. Quite glad about that because that was the last of my fiberglass, and they're the same weight to within 2 grams. So this is 149 grams and this is 147 grams, so that's quite nice. Well, it's been a couple of days since the glass was put on these wings, and unfortunately it looks like the twist that I had in there that was perfect the first day seems to have kind of gone away. Almost looks like there's hardly any twist at all. So I'm just comparing between the root of the wing and the tip. Looks like it's about flat for that one. Maybe a slight bit of twist, slight bit of washout. So that's a bit of a bummer, but at least it's not twisting the wrong way. One thing we can tell for sure though, is that this is a very thin wing. Okay, now we have a nice strong channel for the wings to slot into, the spars to slot into, at the perfect 5-degree angle. And next problem to deal with is how I'm going to remove some foam from the side of there to match this. Unfortunately, I can't just put some sandpaper on here and rub the wing on it because the spar is sticking out this side. So I didn't really think about how I was going to do this. I figured I'd sand it somehow, but I think what I'm going to have to do is just use the knife and just sort of press it on and see where it touches, and then trim a little bit away, and then trim a little bit away, and eventually this edge will sit flush against the fuselage. That'll do. It's a little bit of a gap, but we can fill that with some microspheres. So wingspan is going to be 2.43 meters, 2,430 millimeters. So it's slightly smaller than the ASW28. For this magnetic hatch attachment, it fits on quite nicely at the front, but at the back it was a little bit weak because I'm not using a magnet on both sides. So at the front we have magnets and onto magnets like that, and that's really strong. But at the back, with just this little steel tab and the magnet on the inside, it wasn't very strong. And part of the problem was that the thickness of the fiberglass was holding the magnet a little bit too far away from the steel. And when it was gluing up, it was actually so weak that the magnet fell out of the epoxy just under gravity, and it fell down onto the inside, and I had to pry it off the inside there after it was dry. So what I've done to fix that is I've drilled a hole so that the magnet is, I can push that up there, you can see it's actually poking through a hole in the fiberglass, so that now the steel and the magnet are going to be very, very close to each other. And I'll just put a little bit of fiberglass over there and then some plastic wrap, and then I'll stick this down like that. And now that the steel and the magnet are very close to each other, it's actually quite a decent connection. And I can sort of go like that before it breaks, so that should be fine. This is how it looks down the tail. Those 4 holes there are for a little platform that a flight controller will mount onto. Not sure if I'm ever going to do that, but at least I have those little holes there that will make it easy to do that. And if you look down the front of this, you can actually see all the way through, maybe to the right out the tail at the back. The camera's probably not going to capture it very well. Well, I stuck everything together roughly, like it's just holding on with sellotape at the back there, because I wanted to get an idea of where the CG is going to end up. So anyway, that's what the plane's going to look like. It's quite big, isn't it? But unfortunately, it looks like we're quite nose heavy, and I'm guessing it's because of all this built up stuff here with the carbon and the lots of glass around the front. So what I've discovered is that I'm going to have to put the, even with just a 2-cell lithium ion pack like that, I'm going to have to put it all the way back up there to meet CG. And even then it's a little bit awkward because my flight controller is going to go just above that. So in reality these batteries are probably going to have to go about here. So I might end up having to put a little bit of lead weight on the tail even. Or I could put a camera up there, right? Maybe if I have a camera that stays up there all the time, that might do it. Alright, the root of the tail is now tacked on there just with some Gorilla Glue, and I was able to put some 8mm tubes into the spar holes like that, and then turn it upside down and then flatten the tail against the bench and get everything lined up nicely like that. And so the next job is to put some actual epoxy and fiberglass over that join there. So all of those pieces are going to go wrapped over the top of that. Since the plan was to stick the wings on permanently, I thought I'd just do one little check before I did that to see what it would be like to transport it in my car, and turns out it's going to be just fine. Okay, the wings are tacked on now. I made these little jigs here, just half in airfoil like that again, and I was able to place those under the wings at the right distance, and then use this flat part of the foam to measure, check the height between here and here, and just get that, you know, just right so that the angle of incidence between the tail and the wings is exactly the same as the CAD design, and hopefully that will make it fly just like OpenVSP said it will. And now pretty much the only thing I need to do to finish this plane is to put some epoxy and microspheres or something in there, and then put a little bit of glass over the top of that. So it's just Gorilla Glue tacked on with Gorilla Glue there, but obviously that's not going to be enough to fly it. So let's do one last little layup job and then we're done. There we go, some nice fillets of microspheres and fiberglass under there, and on the top of course, and that pretty much completes the build. So that should be nice and strong. Only thing I have left to do now is make some control wires, push rods for those, and then we should be ready to fly. Oh no, there's one other thing I have to do is I've got some Gorilla Glue, one of these servo plugs here, got some Gorilla Glue in there, so I'm going to have to probably, best thing to do is chop it off and do those crimpings again, I think, just to be safe. And then it should be ready to fly. Unfortunately I have to go away for a few days for Christmas now, so can't really do that right now, but hopefully before the end of the year I will get this up in the air and we'll see how amazingly it flies. So yeah, tune in next time I guess. Until then, thanks for watching. Bye bye.